Recorded. Did you guys hear recording in progress? All right, great. Okay, so it sounds like we're totally recording. And can you guys still see my screen? There's like a big blue Windows desktop thing. All
Yeah, we
right, I'm
can
just
see it.
going to, okay, great. So good morning and welcome back. And I have Canvas open. I just wanted to sort of quickly talk about the steps and then we'll go through these one by one. So here's how this usually works. What we'll do is we'll look at the steps, we'll talk about them, sort of internalize them. I encourage you to just, at that point, sit back and watch me go through them quickly in Rhino. Then I'll undo everything or delete it all, and then we can try to do it step by step together. All right. That way you sort of know what's coming. You've gone through it. We've practiced it once, and then you're ready to try it yourself. Okay. Sound good? All right, great. So let me just double check and make sure that let's see here. My mouse is working. Of course it's not. This is the weirdest thing. Oh, it's because I have Canvas up. Sorry, my bad. All right, so I'm sorry, I'm in Mac OS space, but with Windows also. So anyway, this will be our first foray, and it's designed just to quickly get you up and going with some of the basics with Rhino, right? So we'll be drawing in 2 dimensions, right? We'll be drawing like as if in top view, as if we're looking down on a desktop, and we're drawing things with a pencil or pen. Except we'll be using our mouse, and we'll be doing that digitally. Then we'll start to surface things. So we'll be drawing curves and lines to start with, but then we'll use those curves and lines in order to give things surface and depth and thickness, right? So surfaces and solids. So we'll be doing things like filling in a closed shape with the surface, and then we'll be extruding the surface into a solid, etc. Okay. In doing so, we'll learn how we can snap to different points on the screen, how we can use grids, how we can enter in precise measurements as we draw. We'll make sure that we set our units correctly, so we're dealing with inches or feet and inches, rather than, unless you want to use meters and centimeters and millimeters. Again, I love the math behind millimeters, centimeters, and meters, but whenever I hear an amount in centimeters, my brain has to like translate that into meters and then think about meters as a unit of 3+ feet and then reverse calculate. It's really bizarre. So I just have no sense of scale when it comes to metric. Although ironically, I used to at one point, at least some conventions, we were doing a project in Istanbul and we had to do everything in metric. So, but that's water under the bridge. That was 2000 and maybe year 2000, 2001. I can't remember. It's been so long. All right. So anyway, let's see, what else am I missing here? Oh, and then we'll use some of those geometric transformations. So once we have everything modeled and set, then it's time to move and rotate and put them together, right? Almost as if we had drawn all these things on a piece of paper, which you guys will do at some point when I give you guys some Bristol board. And you would draw this with pencil, and then you would cut it out with X-Acto knives, and then it's about putting it together and gluing it in different ways, right? So all right, so after that, then we'll hopefully today, if not today, then we'll get to it tomorrow. I'll also talk about how we can set up particular projection drawings. Like what I'll probably try to do is get you guys to do some axons, some axonometrics, and we'll talk about axons and isometric drawings. If you don't know what those are, don't worry, but you will soon. And then also maybe turn on the sun and play around with some lighting and get inside and with some perspectives and try to see what kind of interesting effects you get when you get light sort of washing across some of these surfaces and through some of these openings. All right. So that's the agenda. So what we'll do is I'll first start by drawing 40 feet by 40 feet squares. What I mean by 40 feet by 40 feet is we can set our units in Rhino. And typically when we draw and model things in virtual space, whether that's in AutoCAD or whether that's in Rhino or whether that's in SketchUp or whether that's in Revit or any of those tools, we typically model in real scale. Even if we're going to be generating drawings that are at a measured scale, it's going to be a scaled drawing, right? Or even if we're going to use that information to then build a scaled model, right? Typically what we do is we draw in real scale in the virtual environment, and then we can always scale out versions of it for any particular purpose, right? That way, when we actually draw dimensions and leader lines and things like that, it actually turns out to be the right dimension. So in this case, I'll make 4 40-foot by 40-foot squares. Then there's a set of shapes that I'll be making inside, and then I'll use those shapes to trim and split these into actual separate shapes. So you can see the gray versus the white shapes. We'll have a sort of library of pieces and parts to use. Okay. Then we'll take the larger shapes for each of these and break them down into several additional pieces, and that'll be up to you to sort of decide where to break them. There's just a few rules around them, but you'll be cutting this one into 2 pieces using either an X or a Y line. You know, the same thing here, but cutting into 3 additional pieces, 4 and 2, something like that. So the idea is that we all have a set of planar shapes constrained to orthographic geometries, and then it's about composing them, making them solids, and then composing them into a composition that theoretically could be architecture at some point, right? But right now we can just call them planar compositions. They're sort of spatial constructs that we could think about inhabiting and putting little scale figures inside, cutting in section or plan, or generating axons, or getting inside at eye level and generating perspectives, etc. Okay. Just a quick reminder, there is a small rubric here, just again, trying to talk about, well, what constitutes success here? It's so open-ended, it's like I can just put these together any which way, right? So there are a couple of ways to sort of think about this, and a couple of set of rules, right? So you have to imagine a 60-foot by 60-foot by 60-foot cube, and then and arrange these inside. They all have to sort of touch in some way. You're trying to define at least 3 edges of the imagined cube, so you need to sort of reach out and touch at least 3 edges of that sort of larger 60-foot by 60-foot by 60-foot cube, and then try to sort of get inside and look through this thing and try to come up with 3 distinct spaces at least, defined by planes. So now when we talk about, I use the term spaces as opposed to rooms, right? I don't know about you, but whenever I use the word room, my mind immediately thinks of 4 walls and a floor and a ceiling, and then if I need to make an opening, I punch a 7-foot doorway in, right? And what I'd like for you to do is to think about these in terms of not necessarily having to punch openings, but to think about surfaces. And if you need to make an opening, there's ways to do that. You either slide them apart, right? Or you leave it completely open and think of it as a window wall, right? That's a word that we typically use, right? So you can always think later in terms of glass planes as well, but for now, you're just thinking about solid and absence, okay? All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and do this. And I'm just going to quickly blow through this. So I'll be toggling back and forth, right? If you have questions, interrupt me. But after I blow through this really quickly, then I'll just delete it all, and we'll start from scratch, and we'll try to do this step by step together. Sound good? All right, great. Okay, so first things first, let me find my cursor. And let's open up. I should have had Rhino 7 already open. I don't know why I didn't, but and I'm not sure why the resolution isn't updating to my window size. It used to before yesterday morning when I ran a couple system updates. So I don't know what broke. Hopefully it gets fixed the next time I can run an update. I don't know what's going on. It appears between it's sort of not finding my keyboard all the time and not finding my mouse all the time and not finding or not really playing well with my video driver. I would guess it has something to do with the drivers for the Mac OS, and Windows and Parallels just not playing well with them at this point. I'm not sure why. Okay. So this is Rhino. You'll notice mine probably differs from yours in a little bit because I have mine set as a white background by default instead of a sort of muddy gray background. I just like the contrast of the white. Typically the line work you put in here by default will be black or some other color. And so I just like the contrast with the white. You can always turn it to black if you want. That's the traditional AutoCAD contrast. But what you will notice is that when I set it to white, these gray grid lines get really pronunciated, right? Like they really stand out. I consider them a visual distraction. I don't typically use the grid so much, right? So first things first, I'm going to turn this off. And the way I can do these things whenever I want to adjust any settings in Rhino, or at least most settings in Rhino, is I can go to the tools pull down, and at the very bottom is options. Okay. So if you remember one thing that you write down today, tools pull down, options down at the very bottom of that pull down menu. That gives you almost all the settings in Rhino that you ever wanted to touch, and a lot of them that you don't. All right, so here we'll find a lot of different sort of categories of options along the left. If I click on grid, for instance, up near the top, I can toggle off showing the grid lines. And now, that's like, that before it was like exhaustion on my eyes. I don't really care for all those grid lines. They're unnecessary for me. You can also turn off the grid axes if you don't need to. But I kind of like seeing the 0, 0 point over here. You see it also in the z-axis and the x-axis and the y-axis and the z-axis. So you can sort of get a sense of where the 0, 0, 0 point is, which is handy sometimes. And we'll actually draw from that 0, 0, 0 point a couple of times today. So I've turned that grid off. Again, I'm in the options still, tools, options. Here's the Rhino's options box. Another key thing I'm going to do while I'm here with these settings, so I'm going to go down a little further and I'm going to look at units. And there is the units. So from here, I can say model units, and I can change it if it's already set to millimeters or centimeters or meters or feet or something like that. You can go ahead and set these to inches, or let's see, I can say, let's see. What I like is maybe setting it to feet in this case. But then over here, instead of saying decimal, since feet are like base 12, right? I'm just going to say feet and inches, and that way I can type in like 1 foot and 6 inches or something like that instead of 1.5 feet. You know, 1 foot 6 inches is actually pretty easy to do decimal, convert to decimal in your head, but when it's like, you know, something that's not divisible by into 12, it gets a little hairier. So I'm just going to say feet and inches and go ahead and hit OK. All right. So now if I type in 40 into the command line, when it asks me for a length, it'll be 40 feet by default. Okay. And unless I type in that double tick mark, right, for inches, which I can still do as well. All right. So let's talk about the interface just a little bit here. We have a bunch of stuff at the top, and there's a bunch of tabs here. And that's where you can set some of these. So by default, I guess, the standard tab, you have a bunch of like hopeful things that you would normally find in a CAD software program. Things like save and open and new file or print. You have things like zoom, zoom out. There's all kinds of zoom tools here. There's a layers thing you can toggle on and off. And some dimension lines and some other sort of things. There's other tabs up here. I don't typically use them. Some people do. Some people really like to use them. I just never learned how to, that was not something I learned to do. I came from the studio tools and then Maya, and then I discovered Rhino, and it was so much lighter to do NURBS modeling with. So I sort of went to that, and I'm sort of more of a keyboard shortcut sort of person. But I will say the one time I do use the tabs is the sub-D tools, which we won't really get into too much, at least not anytime soon. But it's another way to sort of model a lot of curvilinear freeform geometry. So anyway, you'll notice most of the time I just keep the standard tab open on mine. Over here on the right-hand side, you probably have something that looks like this, the help menu, but hopefully you also have something called properties and this little color wheel icon. You also might have render settings. It's like a sphere with a blue shader attached to it. You might also have material palettes with like a little paint tube. And then also hopefully this pie wedge with layers that are red, white, and blue, which is very patriotic of McNeil to do, I guess, as a layers box or manager. Now, if you don't have any of these things, there's ways to toggle them on and off. In fact, a lot of them you'll find up here. Object properties, render settings, layers, and things like that. If they're floating boxes, you can always drag them. Like here, let me take the layers. You can always drag them. And if you drag them over to the right and wait for it to highlight, then you can dock them over here on the right so they're there all the time. Take some screen real estate away from you. And of course, if you come over here, you can notice your cursor can sort of move these things and make them skinnier or wider, depending on what you need. Sometimes you get layer names that are so long that you kind of need to see some things there, and you might widen that up from time to time, right? If you think about layers, if you've ever used AutoCAD or any other sort of CAD program, you kind of know what layers are. But if you don't, and you're kind of curious, what do I mean by layers? What I always use is the analog or sort of an analogy of the analog sort of trace paper, right? So we use trace paper a lot in architecture when we're drawing things manually, right? And the beautiful thing about trace paper is we can draw something on it and we can overlay another piece of trace paper on it. And because it's translucent, then we can see what we had underneath. We can either trace what we had or draw over top of what we had. We can start to layer things up. And if we, if we keep our layers of trace really well organized, we can always remove or rearrange these layers in relation to each other. And this is kind of the same way, right? So we can put things on different layers, then we can turn those layers on or off, or select just certain things on one layer, etc. Right? It's a way to sort of manage the information, particularly when you have lots and lots and lots of lines, lots and lots of curves and surfaces and polysurfaces, etc. And points and all kinds of other information in your models and your drawings. It's a way to sort of keep things separated. So a lot of times the standards were, keeping wall systems separated in a different layer from the floor systems, separated from the ceiling systems, separated from the mechanical systems. Each one would have a different layer name. And then let's say you need to make a mechanical plan, you would turn on all the information for the floor plans, and then all the information for the mechanical systems, and those would all just be on different layers that you can turn on and off, etc. So anyway, that's layers in a nutshell. And then over here are all our tools, right? So we have a toolbar on the left-hand side. Starts with a cursor and works its way down to all kinds of crazy things. A lot of stuff you might not even use right away, right? But there is a logic to the way this thing is laid out. So up here, we have points. And points are the basic ingredients to make curves, which, surprise, are right underneath. Lots of different ways to make curves and lines. I'm using the terms line and curves pretty loosely. If you think about lines, they're just a subset of curves that happen to have no curvature, right? So we have all kinds of curves, open curves, closed curves. Some of those times those closed curves create geometric shapes like circles or other kind of polygons, depending on how many vertices you have and how much curvature you have or don't have, etc. Right? So points are the basic building blocks to make lines. For instance, right, if I wanted to make a line, the simplest way to make a line would be the shortest distance between 2 points, right? So I just need to give it 2 points as ingredients, and it draws a line in between them, right? So anytime you make a set of lines or curves, chances are the first ingredient it's going to need is a point, at least one, right? If it's a circle, what's that center point? If it's a curve, start giving me control points for that spline, right? If it's a line or a polyline, give me all the vertices, right? The start point, the next point, the next point, the next point, until we get to an end point, right? Similarly, as points are the ingredients for curves, curves are the ingredients for surfaces, all right? So we can use curves and we can do things like sweep them, rotate them, revolve them, loft them, extrude them in order to create surfaces and solids, okay? I use surfaces and solids a little loosely here. There is a slight difference in the way they're stored in geometry or in Rhino, but for all practical purposes, they're the same. And what I mean by that is if you make something that's solid and looks like it's closed off on all sides and is watertight, so to say, when you go inside, there's no mass on the inside. It's all paper thin. It's all basically just a surface wrapped around volume, okay? Rhino is a surface modeler, so there are some programs that actually have solids, and when you cut through a solid, you notice that it's filled in on the inside with mass. Rhino is not that way, so you'll notice that there's a big empty cavity on the inside, even when you have a watertight solid, like a cube or a sphere or something like that, okay? All right. And then down below that, there's actually a set of tools that you can do where you can interact between curves and surfaces. Let's say sometimes you have a surface, but you want to reverse engineer and just get the edge of the surface, and make that a curve that you can build off of later on, right? So there's lots of different ways you can begin to play around with curves and surfaces here. I can extract a wireframe from the surface, make those curves, or I can project a curve onto a surface, right? So I can take something flat and project it onto something that's irregular, like the surface of the earth, etc. Right? And all kinds of other ways of doing things. And then there's the Make 2D, which we'll use later as well, right? We can take a three-dimensional drawing or a three-dimensional model of surfaces and then have it make a two-dimensional flattened line drawing of it for us, etc. So we'll start to get into all of these as we go, but first, baby steps. Down below these things, you see a bunch of other geometric sort of things. There's trim and split, join and explode. We'll get into those today later when I start to draw. And then there's move, rotate, scale, all these sorts of things that you need to, once you have something drawn or modeled, to manipulate it in space, position it carefully, or change its orientation to the world coordinate system. All right, so first things for, oh, and then there's another set of settings down here on the bottom. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and the key thing is you'll remember this once you actually start using them over and over again. So that's why this is a bit of a rote assignment you guys are going to be doing here. It's that way by design. Unfortunately, it won't always be that repetitive, but at the same time, I think the developing a set of muscle memory and trying to remember some of these key settings really sets the stage for you to sort of push forward and advance, right? So we have something called snap down here, right? So you'll notice that I have things like end, near, point, mid, center, and intersection, perpendicular, tangent, quad, knot, vertex, project, and disable. I have a set of things I can toggle on or off here, something like grid snap, ortho, planar, O snap, which is short for object snap, smart track, gumball, record history. There's even something called filter. I'm not even sure what that is. I'll have to look at that later, I guess. All right, so first things first. I know I'm going to be drawing orthographic things. I'm going to be trying to constrain what I draw to 90-degree angles, because that's the rules that I set for you guys to start off with. So first and foremost, I'm going to make sure that this ortho command is set as blue, is toggled on, right? And what that means is if I click on this polyline tool and I click somewhere, it's going to constrain where I can draw into 90-degree increments. If I turn that off, I can draw anything I want, right? Okay, so ortho comes in handy when you want to draw things that are orthographic. In other words, you want to draw things that are going to be constrained to 90-degree increments. You can actually change that increment to 30 degrees or 45 degrees or whatever you want. But I'm just going to leave it at 90, right? You can see I can draw around it. The interesting thing, every time you click a tool from the command line, it prompts you for whatever ingredient or number or parameter it needs, right? So in this case, it says next point of polyline, next point of polyline, right? And if I'm done, I can right click and it ends the command, right? If I want to repeat the last command, I can right click again. Now it wants me to draw the start of a polyline and click and click and click and click and click and click and click. Okay. So that's ortho. Now, let's get a little better at this. So a little more precise. Start a polyline. Let's say I want to actually start at the 0, 0, 0 point. I can actually type in the coordinate of any point I want to start with in the command line. I can just start typing away in my keyboard. 0, 0, 0. Now you can see that it started that point at the 0, 0, 0 point on the Cartesian space. Next point of polyline. I don't necessarily have to guess 40 feet up or 40 feet across. I can actually type that in. 40 feet. Now you can see that it's constrained because I have ortho on in 90-degree increments, either up, down, left, or right, 40 feet. And it's just up to me to decide which direction and click. I can say 40 feet. Click. 40 feet. Click. And then I could say 40 feet and click over here, or I could just say close, right? You notice there's always these parameters here. So I can say close, or I can just type in this. The C is underlined because it's telling me that I can just type in C and hit enter to close it, right? Okay. So there's lots of different ways to do that. Let me just do that again. Let's do it a different way. I'll start at the 0, 0, 0 point, 0, 0, 0. And I'll type in 40. I can just type in 40. I don't necessarily need the foot tick because I've set my units to be feet, right? So anytime I just type in a number, it's going to be feet. So 40, 40, 40. Now I just want to, if I want, I can just snap over here to this starting point as my endpoint, right? So that's where having this O snap or object snap comes in handy. I can make sure that's toggled on. And then in this case, I'll just toggle the endpoint. Now I can snap to this point right here. You can see as soon as I get close to it, CAD prompts me like, you just want to snap at this point, right? And you're like, sure, okay, why not? Okay, so now I closed that polyline. Let me start another one. Let's do it again here. I'm just going to make something over here, 40 feet, 40 feet, right? Let's look at these object snaps. I can turn on near, and then let me turn off ortho here. Not sure what's going on. Right, and so now it's snapping near anything, right? Or I can turn on, instead of near, I can turn on midpoint. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, it's because I have a smart track on. I'm going to turn that off for a moment. Oops. Always hit Control Z if you click in the wrong place. I don't know why my object snaps are not working in here. Yeah, okay, sorry. I don't know why it's not snapping to the midpoint there, but I can snap to a midpoint. I could try to find a point that's perpendicular. Of course, I can't really do that here. Or a tangent, or where two things intersect. Right there, right, etc. So those object snaps are there to be helpful for you. Again, I'm not sure why my computer is being a real jerk to me today. It's also being a little laggy. I don't understand why it's doing that. Right, so I snapped to that point and closed it up. All right. Okay. Last but not least, since I made one 40-foot by 40-foot square already, do I really need to draw it 4 times manually? No. I could just make a copy of this 3 more times, right? So you'll notice that I can always go over here and try to find the right button on the toolbar, or all of these commands also have a command in the command line. So there's the copy, right? It has this sort of white box and then a bunch of copies of it in blue over here. But if I can't remember where that is, I can just start to type in copy. And then it prompts me for select the objects to copy. So I'll select that. When I'm done selecting everything, I'll hit enter. Then the point to copy from and the point to copy to. And I can just do this over and over again until I'm done. Right, 1, 2, 3. All right, so now I have 4 boxes, right? So I can manually draw them. It's not that hard. Or I could draw it once and then copy them over 3 more times. So there's 4 boxes. All right, now this is where, let me just remind myself what the instructions are here. I'm gonna try to move this over so I can just click it. All right, so I have 4 feet, 6 feet, 30 feet. All right, great. So now I need to draw inside these boxes. There's a couple of things I can do. One, you'll notice that if I drew this all with one polyline, it's all joined together. When I select one side, it selects all 4, right? Okay. So let's talk about that. I can explode and I can join things over here, right? So the icons for these: join as a puzzle pieces sort of going together, joining together. Explode looks like this really dumb looking explosion or flash. I don't know what. So here's what I can do. I can select this thing that's been joined together and I can explode it. Now I've exploded it into its 4 separate segments at sides, right? If I wanted to reverse of that, I could select all 4 of those and I could join them together. Each time it's telling me 4 curves joined into one closed curve, or if I exploded a curve into 4 segments, right? So get used to looking at that command line. It's telling you exactly what it wants, what it needs, or what it just did. And so get used to looking at that. And oftentimes there's settings in some of these tools that are helpful to sort of toggle on or off in that command line as you go. Okay, so what I've done is I've exploded this, and now I can just make a copy of this top curve, 4 inches down, or sorry, 4 feet down, 6 feet down. Basically, I'm going to draw. Sorry, this is where it's annoying. I have to keep toggling. So 4, 6, and then I'll do the same thing, but off from the left to the right, 4 feet that way, and then I'll start to trim things around, right, in order to sort of draw these things. All right, so copy, C-O-P-Y. I'm just going to copy this. All right, now before I just clicking, instead of clicking, I'll just say 4 feet. Then I'll right click to repeat the last command. 6 feet. And then I'm really kind of dumb today. Okay, so 4 feet that direction, and then 24. 4 and 24. Okay, couldn't remember those numbers for some reason. All right, copy. I'll copy this one over. 4 feet. Right click, repeat last command. 24 feet. All right. And then I have to try to remember what I remember. So now I'm going to use the trim command. All right. So it's right here, trim and split. So let's see how these things work. First of all, if I use trim, it's going to say select a cutting object. I'm going to use both of these as cutting objects. All 3 of these, in fact. So I'll select them all at once. And right click to enter, or enter to end that. Now select the object to trim. So each part of these lines, wherever they intersect, they'll be trimming away. Whichever parts I select, they'll trim. Okay, and then when I'm done, I right click to accept. I do the same thing over here. Although I have to think about, well, what does this shape look like again? Okay, all right. So kind of a funny thing. I can't remember simple things today. All right. So there's that shape. All right, so that was using trim, and that quite literally, trims one part away, it disappears, right? When you start to define what the cutting object is and then what you're trimming. For split, it's a little different, similar but different. So split, I say, what's the object to split? I'm going to split this edge, right click, and then I'm going to say select the cutting objects. So I'm going to use that to split this edge. And now nothing disappeared, but that edge has been split into 2 separate polylines, right? So now I can begin to hold the shift key down. I hope. I don't know why I wonder if my keyboard just isn't working correct. This is really weird. Sorry. And then there's the command control difference in Windows, of course. I don't know why oh, that's weird. Yeah, I don't know why my shift key isn't working in here. That's really bizarre. I mean, I was able to type commands in, so I don't understand what it's. All right, well, suffice to say, when you want to select multiple things by clicking around and put them all in one selection, you hold down the shift key, which for me is, again, is it Monday or what? What's going on here? I'll go ahead and join those together. I'll go ahead and select those and join these together. Right, I need to actually split this. So I'll split this with this. I'll select those and join them together. You can see as I click and drag that away, right? Now what's interesting is I only had 1 copy of these lines, these outlines. And so now the rest of this shape, this larger shape, disappeared, right? When I moved that away. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly trace over this using my object snaps ends. So now I have this new polyline that I drew along with this old polyline. Let's see, I'll just select all of them together and start joining them. All right. Okay. Now, what's interesting is as I go around, I want to make sure I have a closed shape. So I'm joining them together. And it says two curves joined into one closed curve up here in the command line for me, right? So if I select this, another way to sort of see if something's closed, if I select it and I go to the properties box over here where I have layers right now, if I go to, oh, that's weird. Let's see. Select it. It's telling me to type it's closed curve, right? it wasn't closed, let's say I explode this and I just select one of the sides, it'll tell me open curve, right? It also tells you what layer it's currently on, what color it's used, what line type, etc. Right? So lots of different ways to, let's go ahead and select those, join them together again. You can see it said 6 curves joined into one closed curve. So that makes me happy. Right. Okay. All right. So you guys ready to try this yourself? All right. Yay. Okay. Just blow it away. And like, oh, look, there's a rectangle tool. I could say corner to corner if I really wanted to. Let me try that. First corner of rectangle, 0, 0, 0. Other corner, 40, 40, 0, right? X, Y, and Z. Ah, and there's a 40 by 40 box. So yeah, I could just do that with a rectangle tool if I wanted to. There's lots of different ways to draw these things if you want. So here's the polyline tool. Start a polyline, 0, 0, 0. 40, enter. Want to make sure that my ortho is set. Want to make sure that I set my units to feet. 40, and close. All right. And then when I'm ready, copy. All right. Left click, right click on your mouse. That's another reason why you want a mouse, because left click and right click do different things, right? So left click is sort of, making geometry, starting geometry, clicking on points. Right click is either enter, like if on the keyboard, like you're done, or you with a certain command, or if you right click outside of command, then it'll repeat the last command, which comes in really handy when you're doing a lot of repetitive tasks. How are we doing? Do we have a square yet? All right. Okay, so again, here's my setup. In case you're like, something's not working right. I have ortho. It's highlighted blue because it's toggled on. Also object snap, and I have my object snap. The only object snap I have set on right now is end. I also have smart track on, which is like kind of a impromptu snap. It sort of tells you, gives you some data as you're moving your cursor around. Yeah, what's up?
So working on Mac for today, where I'm looking for the ortho area. Do you happen to know where that would be located?
Oh, you see it along the top? It's usually like there's grid snap, ortho, planar, object snap, smart track, etc.
There we go.
All in the
Okay,
same place.
perfect.
Did
Yep,
you find
see
it?
it.
Yeah, it's
Yep,
different. I don't know
got
why
it.
they made so many dramatic changes.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, it's annoying. Another thing I'll probably toggle on, and sometimes it's called planar, right? What that does is if I'm drawing in the, let's say, the top view, and I want to constrain everything to that XY plane where Z equals 0, and I'll turn on planar, and it sort of keeps everything in that plane wherever I snap to first. And that way, if I look at it in a front or side view, it doesn't look like a roller coaster track by accident, like it was snapping all over the place in the Z direction. It keeps everything sort of flattened in the plane that I was working in. Okay, so I'll turn that on too. I have ortho, planar, object snap, and smart track on. For the object snaps, I have end on. I've set my units to inches, or sorry, to feet, and I'm drawing 40-foot boxes, 40 feet by 40-foot squares. How's everybody doing? Everybody have one square yet? We all good? All right. Ready to move on? Excellent. Yeah, all right. And so again, trim, split, join, and explode. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in explode and explode these. Now each of these closed curves are now 4 separate sides. So I exploded them. All right. And now I'm just going to use those sides. I'm just going to start copying them down. So, I'm sure you probably noticed this before, but I'm looking, I have a line 4 feet away from the top edge, then a line 6 feet away from that line. In this first square, I have one that's 4 feet down and then 26 feet down from that. or 10 feet from the bottom, 10 and 10 from the top and the bottom, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and start to make those guidelines, almost as if I was hand drafting this, right? Like you just sort of measure and you draw a really light guideline through. So that's what I'm going to do. 4, 6, 4, 26. Okay, so I'm just trying to remember those. And I'll use the copy command. I'm just going to type in copy and copy this 4 feet down. Make sure that ortho is still there. Right click to repeat the last command, select, put that 6 feet down. Do the same thing over here, 4 feet. And then 26 feet. All right, all the way down there. I think it was 10 and 10 over here, so I'll just 10 feet down. And then 10 feet up from the bottom. I can't remember that last one. Let's see, what was it? 32, yeah, just 32, or 8 feet from the bottom. I'll just do 8 feet from the bottom. So copy, select, 8 feet. When I'm done, I hit that right mouse button. If I want to repeat copy again, hit that right mouse button again. Now I'm ready to draw some vertical construction lines. Let's see here. Just have to remember where those are. Let's see, 4 feet over 24. So 4 and 24. Copy. Where's my cursor? There it is. '24. Going back and forth between windows is annoying. 12 and 20. Okay, 12, 20. Wait, and then the other one was, let me just look. 16 and 8. Okay, it wasn't centered. So 12, 12, 20. All right. So how is this going? 16, 16. Copy. I'll copy this over 16 feet. Type in 16, hit enter, click. All right. All these things are going to be trimmed and split away later. Let's see. Last one, 6 feet and 4 feet. All right. Copy. Okay. So mine looks like that. I love having, extra sort of construction lines and construction geometry. So I'm totally digging this. Let's see here. Is it working? Everybody's just going through the motions? Control's like, yeah, I did this like 10 weeks ago. Sorry, Control. Hang in there, my man. Bijan's probably thinking the same thing. What's up, Nate?
It's just having trouble copying on the Mac version. Just trying to
Okay.
go through it.
Are you
Yeah.
typing COP and just getting the IntelliSense to come kick in?
It says select objects to copy, and then it's highlighting yellow, and then it'll say like what point do I just press enter? So
Yes.
I'm highlighting the first.
So here, let me go through the motions with you. It should be similar, right? So I'll type in copy on mine. Copy, you can see it's coming up. Let's see, copy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's telling me select objects. I'm going to select the objects. When I'm done, I can hit enter or right click. Right click with your mouse.
Okay.
Then point to copy from, and I can click anywhere on my screen for a point. And now instead of clicking a point to copy to, I'm going to actually enter in 40 or 10 or something like that.
Oh, I'm just trying to get the first square copied to make 4 squares. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then
yeah.
you can just copy it over. If you want to make a dimension, you can. But copy, select the object to copy, and now I'm just clicking and then clicking where I want to place it. All the copies. That makes sense.
Something else that helps is when you have the gumball machine on, you select an object, you can hold off, drag it to the next object.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if you're using gumball.
Yeah, it just seems to be sliding the first square over. I'll have to I think it'd be probably easier for me just to download the one on the Windows version and then walk through this later. Watch the
Okay.
recording. Yeah.
But you're using just typing in copy?
Yeah, so I'm typing in copy and I'm able to highlight the first square, but then it'll be like there's a drop down list that says choose objects and it'll say curve, 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 and then none. And then in the top left, it'll say select objects to copy and it'll say press enter when done, or I can type something in. So I'll select it, but when I
So
slide it over,
I see. So let me
yeah,
just replicate that, right? So if I say select objects copy and then I click somewhere, does it do something like that where it's saying,
yes, yep,
right? So what's happening is I have several different curves there.
okay,
Close enough where I click that's saying, well, which curve do you want? This one or this one?
gotcha.
This one or this one, right? So here's one way you can do that. If you have a square and it's all already exploded, or you just want to select all of this, I can click and drag from left to right and it's draw a box all the way around it,
Mm-hmm.
select everything inside.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I can say copy, or I can hit enter, and I can say copy from, click, copy to, click.
When you say copy from, copy to,
It just needs points. So you're clicking a point and then you're clicking another point.
yeah,
It's like the point to copy from and the point to copy to. Does that make sense? Here, watch mine again. So I'm selecting everything. When I'm done, I right click to enter. Point to copy from, I'm just going to click here. And I'm going to drag my cursor. Since I have ortho on, I can only go up or down or sideways.
sure.
And then when I want to make a copy, I click. And I click.
Hmm.
And I click. Until I'm done, I hit enter or right click.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing different. I feel like I'm following along, but
I tell you what, at the beginning of studio today or sometime during studio today, I can take a look at it with you. When we're
yeah, that would be
meeting in
helpful.
person. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, that would be
Normally
helpful.
that'd be
Yeah.
something I could just look over your shoulder and help you out. But so I'll do that. Remind me if I forget.
Okay, yeah, we'll do.
How's everybody else doing? Dina's getting her mouse. Yep, definitely need a mouse. It really does help, especially left click, right click. I can only shift click so many times my MacBook Pro touchpad before I'm like, I just need a mouse to right click. Or command click. All right, so everybody have something that looks like this? You guys ready to trim and split away? All right. So let's do the easy one first. Let's do this middle one where I just have a hole in the middle, right? So here's the larger rectangle. I just want to trim this out. I'm just going to use trim. I can just type in trim in the command line if I don't remember which tool it is over here. And I'm just going to make all of these cutting objects. Now, watch for a minute, and I'm going to show you how you can use the selection window, drag the selection window from left to right or from right to left, and what the difference is. If I select things from left to right, like I draw that window, it's only going to select things entirely within that selection window that I made, right? So it only selected these two curves because there were the only two things that were completely inside the window that I selected. If I go from right to left, dragging that window, it's everything that touches that window that I dragged. Inside, outside, as long as it sort of intersects it some way, it'll be selected, right? So dragging from left to right versus right to left, there's a difference, right? That's similar to AutoCAD if you're used to AutoCAD. If I accidentally select something that I don't want to select, I don't have to hit escape and restart the command. I can hold down my control key. Well, normally I can. But for some reason my keyboard isn't working. You can hold down the control key and then click on one of these things that are selected and it'll deselect them. Again, I don't know why. Maybe I have to restart my system. I don't know what's going on, but between my keyboard, my mouse, and my screen resolution. There's just something really weird going on with my laptop. Maybe I need to download the Mac version so I don't have to deal with this anymore. Yikes. All right. Well, anyway, we'll figure that one out. But it is different in looks. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and type in trim, and it's going to ask me to select cutting objects. So in this case, I'm just going to drag something around that just covers the 4 lines that I want to draw, right? Those are all going to be cutting objects. They're all sort of intersecting each other, and we're going to use them to cut other things, right? And then all of these, where any of these cutting objects intersect something else, I can then click those objects and make them disappear, right? So I can trim that, trim that, trim that, trim that, that, and that, right? I could click on them, or I can drag on them in order to sort of select them to delete them away, right? So now I have just these edges, and they're all trimmed up. I have these edges, they're all trimmed up. You know what? It's going to drive me crazy until I join all these together. I'm just going to select all of these at once and then type in the join command, or use the puzzle piece command for join. In other words, I want to turn them into closed polylines, right? Closed shapes. And so it says 8 curves joined into 2 closed curves, which makes sense, right? It looked at these and said all 4 of these are contiguous, and I can close them up and join them into one closed curve. The same thing for these. So I could just select them all at once, type in join, and join all of them together at once. There's that closed curve. That's it. That's closed curve. All right. Trim, 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 trim. Now that'd be different if I undid that and I use split, right? Just like I said before. Split, I could, again, use these objects to split. Select the cutting object. I'd select them all again. Did it work? No, it didn't. You can't have cutting objects be the same as selecting objects. That's annoying. So I'll select these as cutting objects, and then I'll select these as the objects, and then these things get split, right? And then I could just delete these away manually if I wanted to. Select them and hit delete on my keyboard. Right. All right, but that trim tool comes in really handy. So I'm just going to make all these cutting objects, hit enter, and select the parts that I want to disappear. I almost imagine this is like using dynamite. All right, here we go. Now select them all and join them, which is really easy to do with this one. All right. Sometimes you're going to use split, sometimes you're going to use join, or sorry, sometimes you're going to use split, sometimes you're going to use trim, right? So depends on if you want to have lines left over or you want to just get rid of certain parts, right? So I have this L I need to carve out here. So first I'll use trim. Let's see here, TRIM. I'm going to say this will be my cutting tool. I'm going to trim these parts away. Then I can use these as the cutting tools and trim these parts away, right? And I could join these together. 3 curves join into one open curve, right? It's not closed, it just joins them. Let's see. I know I'm going to trim. I'll use this and trim this part away and this part away. And I'll use this as a cutting tool and trim this part away, right? I'll go ahead and join these together. All right, so you can see what I have here. Oh, another nice thing about a mouse, you can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out dynamically. Right mouse button in the ortho views like top, side, and front. You can just use it to pan, right, to move your screen around. So that's handy. So let's see. I need to close up this shape. So I'll do that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split. I'll split this curve and this curve using this. So now those are 2 separate. No, these are 2 separate line fragments. Go ahead and join these together. And join these together. Okay. I'm going to drag these away from the those curves so you can see exactly what I have, right? So I dragged those away. So suffice to say, we need to make a copy of this. I'm just gonna make a copy of this and move it out here. So I know I have that piece and I have this piece still. I needed to use this piece and carve out of that piece, right? So let's go ahead and split or trim. Let's see, which one, what should I do? Well, I'll tell you what, first off, I'm just going to take all of these and explode them again. And then from there, it's just trying to figure out, well, which parts do I delete away, right? There's those. Oh, yeah, look at that. Okay, now I can join that together. I have two shapes, all right. How's that coming along? Is that working? It's 10:40. We just have a few more things to do. So take 5 more minutes and see how far you can get. But the last thing I want to show, well, maybe the last really important thing I want to show you today for overnight between now and tomorrow will be turning these into surfaces and then giving them some thickness. That's actually one of the easier parts. It's just once you have everything closed up, it's nice. Okay. So take about 5 minutes. About 10:45 or so, I'll cut back in. I'm just going to go ahead and trim these up myself for these so I have them all ready and make sure that I have them all joined together. Let's see here. I have to remind myself what these things look like. All right, so I have like a uppercase P or something here. All right, I got it. All right, trim. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, let me just double check that. Yep, looks good. Okay, now what? Oh, right, I gotta trim these things away. Or split them. I'll split these with these. Yep, excellent. Now I'll just join all this stuff together. Just a little notch at the top there. Okay, great. Easy peasy. 3 more minutes or so, and then let's move on to the next step, and we can always go back. Okay. Someone's hammering something out in the hallway. Interesting. 1 more minute or so. Okay. If you're not done, don't worry. I do want to move on to the next steps. All right. All right, we ready? All right, so I have Canvas back up. And as a reminder, once you get those broken up into two distinct shapes, then you're taking each of the larger shapes and dividing them again. It's kind of up to you. You can just, again, the key thing is you adhere to 90-degree angles for this. No diagonals, no curves. So I'm just going to, you got to put this one into two pieces, cut this one into 3 pieces, that one into 4, and then the other one into 2. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to pick something like right here. Although I feel like I should pick some sort of 4-foot module based off of what came before. Maybe I'll snap to that. So what I'm doing is I just drew a line. I'm going to use that to sort of split these things apart, right? So I'm going to use the split command, split this larger shape with this line that I just drew. Go ahead and delete that line. But now you can see that I've split those into 2. Now I just need to close them up. So I'm going to start another polyline, make sure I snap to that endpoint, snap to this endpoint. I'll start another polyline, snap to that endpoint, snap to that endpoint, select these things and join them together. I'll do that again, but over here. Turn on mid. There we go. So I'll use these to split this. Let's see. Split this larger shape. Use these as the cutting objects and hit enter. Now I get rid of these. Oops, I just meant to select them. There we go. So I have that and I have that. Now I just need to close these things up, right? So again, I'm just going to go back to the line tool, click, click, snap, snap. Each time end to end. Right click to end the command, and then right click to start the new command. Join, join, join. Each time it's telling me it's been joined into one closed curve, so that's good. This one I have to cut into 4 shapes. I'm just going to go plain Jane here and snap to the midpoints here and use that. So let's see. I'm going to split these using this, this, and this. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, great. So delete, 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 delete. I'll just move these away from each other a little bit so I can see. And those. Now just need to close them up again. Left click, right click to repeat last command, right click to repeat the last command, left click, right click. There's a muscle memory, and once you get it, it doesn't take too much to just do it. Your brain can go into autopilot a little bit here. I believe this goes and gets cut into 2 pieces. So why don't I just, I'll just snap here like that, split, type in split that, right click to accept, left click the object I want to use to cut, right click to accept, success. I'll delete that cutting object away. I'll move this over. Now time to close these up with polylines. So that's what I'm doing. Right, let's quick drafting 101. So now I have a kit of parts that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Looks like I have about 15 pieces of 15 components I can start to surface and then put together to make some sort of spatial construct, some sort of hypothetical architecture. All right. How's that coming along? Is that making sense? Is the split working for you the way you want? Yeah. Okay. I get a thumbs up. I'm seeing some other facial expressions that maybe suggest not so much. All right. So a couple of things about trim and split. You know, if you have a closed shape like this, and I try to split it like this, it's not going to work. Right? Because this is a closed shape, it can't split the closed shape because this doesn't intersect all the way through the closed shape. So there are weird things like that, right? You gotta it uses a set of Booleans, sort of trues and falses. And so if there's no inside and outside or A and B, then it has a difficulty and will error out on you when it comes to the trimming and splitting. So there is that. But basically all I'm doing is I'm thinking about, okay, where would I trace a knife along? And I make that line, right? I make sure it cuts all the way through and then some. And I say split. And I look at the command line. And the first thing it wants for the split is the object to split up, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select that large shape. Right click when I'm done selecting all the objects I want to split up. Then the next instruction has for me is select the cutting objects, right? So select that path that I want to use to sort of slice this. And then I can right click when I'm done, selecting all that stuff. And it tells me one open curve, right? One curve split into 2 pieces, right? So now I have 2 pieces here. And I can close those up by drawing some new lines. And then I can join all those back together. All right. So oftentimes when we're, let's say, drawing a section or drawing a floor plan, you know, floor plan is just a cut through something, right? Looking down. A section is just a cut through something, but looking laterally, right? Oftentimes we'll have a bunch of lines. We'll have datums like ground and sort of elevation datums. We'll start to draw where we think walls are. And we simply, block them in, but then we have to sort of trim things out and split things in order to sort of make a nice close shapes and things like that. So this again is good practice, even if we're not literally drawing plans and sections, we're drawing components because you'll need these trims and splits and joins and those sorts of things. And chamfers and fillets we'll get to in a little bit, but as you go. All right, to close up corners and create closed shapes, full shapes, get rid of intersecting lines that we don't need anymore, etc. All right, I do want to move on to the last steps really quickly, okay? So if you look at the last part here, there's giving these things, surfacing these things and extruding them into solids, okay? And then there's moving and rotating them around within a hypothetical 60 foot by 60 foot by 60 foot cubic volume, okay? So first I'll show you how to surface and extrude. And then I'll show you how to use move and rotate and snap and in order to get those, start putting those together, okay? All right, so by default, you typically have 4 windows, top, front, right, and perspective. And if you want to blow one of those up and just toggle one of them to fill your screen, you just double click on the label. And for instance, I have top view filling my screen. If you want to toggle back to 4 views, just double click on that label again, and you get all 4 views back again, okay? What I find helpful is that in perspective, oh yeah, gosh, for some reason my shift key isn't, I don't know what's going on. My shift key isn't working. I probably need to restart my laptop. Every time I make changes in Parallels, I have to reboot the whole thing again. It's really annoying, which I can't do when I'm on Zoom and trying to telecast to you guys. But suffice to say, right click in the perspective view, you can begin to sort of tumble or dolly, right? Rotate your view. If you hold down the shift button along with the right mouse click, then you can pan just like you would over here with just the right mouse button. Okay. You can see these are all flat. When I look at them in the front and right view, they're all flat. When I look at them in perspective view, they sure are. They're all drawn on this XY plane, the plane that coincides Z being 0, right? All right, so I'm going to look at perspective view because what we're going to do is inherently 3-dimensional from here on out. All right, so I double-clicked on the perspective label and filled my screen with just the perspective viewport. And let's just test this out. So we've been using the line tool, and there's also shapes and polygons and curves and things like that, arcs, and lots of different ways you can create different types of curves in line work. If you come down to this first blue icon and you click and hold, you get a sub-menu with all the different ways you can begin to create surfaces in Rhino, okay? So every time on these buttons on the toolbar, you see a little gray triangle in the bottom right. You click and hold, you'll see that there's a whole host of tools here. There's more than just one tool to create a set of polylines, right? Or a set of control point curves and splines, or a set of polygons or circles or arcs, right? Same thing with surfaces. So the surfacing tools are right here, and I'm just going to click and hold, and I undocked it out here so that I can sort of look at each of these, okay? One by one. All right, so really quickly, just take a look at my screen for a moment. And I just want to quickly go through some of these because there's a lot of different tools here for ways to create surfaces. And the first one is surface from 3 or 4 corner points. So that just means, and it's telling me first corner of a surface, second corner, third corner. If I just want a 3-pointed surface, I can right click and enter, and you can see that I have a surface. Now it looks kind of like just a set of curves. And so if I go to my viewport label, then that little arrow next to the perspective label, Right now I can see that it's set to wireframe, and I can turn it to set it to shaded instead. Now you can see that I'll shade the surfaces with the generic gray shader for me, right? So I can sort of see them, right? So I'll just turn on off ortho here for a moment and then make a four-sided one, right? There it is. Okay. There's ways to make fill in 2, 3, or 4 edge curves with a surface that sort of skins in between them. Loft, if you have a series of sort of sectional profiles, you can actually sort of skin in between those as well. If I have a closed poly curve, like a circle or a square or what we just drew, I can fill those in with a surface, right? So here, for instance, I can fill that in with the surface. Now, not only do I have the curves, but I have a surface, right, that's sort of filled in, right? I can revolve or sweep things along a path, and we'll do some of these things later on, okay? Let's talk about extrude. Let's see, it looks like this, right? So you guys know what extrude means? Like, we use extrusions all the time, and we see them all the time. Basically, you take a profile, you take a direction, that profile gets swept or extruded along that profile or that axis or that direction. So things like plastic sometimes are forced through a mold, right? That's an extrusion, a plastic extrusion. We see these a lot in the building industry, right? So if you think about it, what you typically call I-beams, W flanges, W shapes, like the steel beams, where they sort of form like a sort of capital I, right? Those are extrusions, right? They're sort of you take that one I shape and then you extrude it out at a certain length, right? So let me just show you extrude. I'm just going to use the button, but of course we can always just type in extrude. And it's going to ask me select the curves to extrude. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 3. Okay. And now you can see I can just sort of move in the direction I want and click whatever dimension I want the distance, or I could type in a distance up here, right? So, but you can see that there's also some other options up here. So for instance, it says, do you want to extrude both ways? In which case, then if I move up, let's say in the positive Z direction, it'll extrude in both the positive and the negative at once. So I can go look at these options, and I can click on the ones that I want to toggle on or off. Now it says both sides no, so I can just move in one direction or the other, right? Solid. Oh yeah, I'm going to type in, see where it says solid and it says equals no. If I hold my cursor over that, it's a hyperlink. If I click on that, I can toggle it to yes. And now it'll actually close off the bottom and top faces for me. So I can extrude these into solids. And now if I want to just extrude it any direction visually and then click enter, I can extrude it up however far I want with my mouse. If I want to be very particular about the amount of extrusion I want, right? In this case, I said 1 foot in the instructions. I can type in 1, then hit enter, right? Okay. All right, so I type in extrude. In this case, I'm going to extrude curve, right? Because my ingredients that I'm entering in are curves. That's what I want to extrude. Ask me what curves to extrude. I'm just going to go ahead and select all the rest of these curves. Do them all at once, right? Now it's going to visually let me extrude these things, but I'm just going to go up to before I click anything, I'm going to go up to the options. I'm going to make sure solid is set to yes, both sides set to no. And I'm going to type in when I want to extrude upwards. I'm going to make sure that it's going up in the right direction. The direction I want to extrude in, I'm going to type in 1, and then I'm going to hit enter, right? That's how that works. Now suddenly I have solids I can move around. Yay. All right, how's that working on your end? It might be a little different on the Mac side. Nate, where I was having these settings over up here in the command line, you might have a box over here on the left with like check marks and things you can uncheck and check. For the distance, there might be a field over here that you can, a form field over here you can enter things into. So it's
Yeah,
different. It is different.
it is. I I see what you mean.
Although
I
you
see.
should have the same settings. They're in a different place. They look different.
Yeah, it is, but I feel like I understand why the Windows version, it seems a little bit more intuitive for typing in the commands or being able to
Yeah.
toggle from them. So
Yeah. All right. So how's it going? Everybody getting extrusion to work? Yeah. All right, great. Fantastic. That's wonderful. That's so good. Makes me happy. All right. So there's a couple things. One, you'll notice if you click down, let's say in one of the bottom edges of these solids it just made, right? Look at mine. There's a selection menu that pops up and it goes, I can't tell if you're trying to select the original curve or the extrusion that you just made. And you can pick one or the other, right? So it left the original curves that it didn't get rid of those, right? They're still there, all those original curves. And those can be handy to keep around, or you might want to delete those, right? Either way, at this point, I want to select all of those curves and put them on a different layer so I can just turn them off and I can turn that layer back on later on if I need them again. Okay. All right. So really quickly, let's talk about this. At this point, all I have are curves and then these closed poly surfaces or solids that I made. So if I type in the command SEL or cell, right, which is short for select, right, you can see that I can select all the objects in my scene. I can select all just the curves or all surfaces or all poly surfaces, etc. Right? So this is one way. If I say cell, and then I think there's where's my cursor go? Cell curve, right? So CRV is short for curve. So if I type in cell curve, they'll select all the curves in my scene all at once in my model here, my file. And if I go to the properties box, I can see that they're all set to the default layer. Instead of being on the default layer, I'm going to turn them on to layer 1. I'm going to go to this field. I'm going to set them all to a different layer. And then when I go to my layers box, right, I can see, okay, well, I have all these layers are turned on because all the light bulbs are on. And I have a check mark here on the default layer. I'm not sure where the name is for these layers. Oops. Somehow I've managed to, something's going on here. There should be names for these. I don't know why there aren't. That's weird. I can turn that layer off. And in fact, I can, oh, there they are. Okay. I don't know what's going on with my display driver right now in Windows. But if I click on one of those labels, I can also rename these. I can say original curves and sort of keep things organized, right? That way, if I start to label layers, I can start to make new layers. I can start to put things on different layers. I can start to turn things on or off and keep things organized that way, right? And I can file those away and I can always toggle them back on later when I need to, right? All right. While I have the layers box up, I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to say 60, short for 60 by 60 by 60 volume. All right. And if I look at this column here where there's a check mark, that check mark means that the default layer is set to the sort of the default layer, that it's anything I make new will be on that layer, right? So I'm going to set the default layer to 60 volume, this new layer that I made with a volume of, or sorry, a color of purple, violet. And now I'm going to make a box that's 60 by 60 by 60. All right. So just as there was a shortcut here, we could actually make a 60 by 60 box on the XY plane in top view and then extrude it upwards, right? Just like we did, and make it a solid. But, and you know, you do that if you want. But just like we took the shortcut of, instead of doing a polyline all the way around, we just made a box, a rectangle. We can do the same thing here. We can make a box corner to corner. So in this case, first corner of base, 0, 0, 0. And then the other corner would be 60, 60, 60, right? Because it's going to be a volume. I'm going to give it 60 in X, 60 in Y, and 60 in Z. Oh, sorry. I guess not. I guess it just wants then the height. So separately, that's annoying. So I'll just do 60 there. Okay. There's a volume. Yay. All right. Now, remember how we toggle between wireframe and shader or shaded mode, right? If I go to the viewport label, this little arrow here, oops, I double clicked. So it toggled back to the 4 views, back to the 1 view. If I go to the arrow next to it, there's other viewport settings here. You can do rendered, right? And then it actually gives you soft shadows and a little bit of shading and light. You can do ghosted, which is like shaded, but you can actually sort of see inside. X-ray is similar as well, right? You can sort of see what's going on inside. So I recommended looking at, depending on which one you prefer, ghosted or X-ray, if you want to have that sort of 60 by 60 volume here to work with as you start to move these things in. But now let's take a look at the move and rotate and all this other stuff, right? So if you come down here, there is a box that's then with an arrow and moves another box this way. And that's the move icon. You can see if I click and hold, you can see all the sort of geometric transformations I can do. There's move, and there's move vertical or move normal. There's soft edit curve. There's copy. There's rotate. There's scale. There's mirror. There's orient, etc. Right? There's make arrays. There's flow along curves and paths, and there's more stuff than you can shake a stick at, so, as you say, right? We're just going to use move and rotate, and maybe a little bit of copy. Okay, and so I find it's actually easier. Sometimes I remember where this button is, and sometimes I just want to type something in. I start to type in move, and I'm just going to move this. And again, I can make sure I have snap set. And I just want to say end, and I'm going to snap to that corner, and I'm going to snap it over here to that corner. So point to move from and point to move to. Now I have something touching this edge, and this edge, this corner, and then this face of this volume that I created, right? Let's say I want to make one of these vertical. This is where having 4 viewports can come in handy, right? Because I can, if I have enough screen real estate, which is really easy when you have a second monitor to plug into, when you're at home or something. I can use the rotate tool. I can type in rotate, and then I can pick which vantage point, which viewport I want to actually rotate in. So if I pick the right viewport, right, first of all, I select the thing that I want to rotate. Let's say I want to rotate this. And I want to make sure I'm in the right viewport here. And it says the center of rotation. And so I'm going to snap, let's say, to this bottom edge. And then the angle or first reference point. So I could type in an angle, like let's say 90 degrees, and hit enter. It's going to rotate at 90 degrees. In this case, it rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. Right? I'll undo that, and I'll do it a different way. I'll still click on this point, the center of rotation, right? Now, because I'm in one of the ortho views, it's automatically interpreting the center of the rotation axis as the sort of whatever whatever axis is the sort of the normal direction to the viewport that I'm on, right? Through this point that I just clicked, right? So in this case, it's the x-axis because I'm looking at it through the zy plane. I could also, since I don't have ortho on, but I have smart track on, I could rotate it like this, and I could rotate it a certain degree, right? Like I'd say 30 degrees, or I could tilt it upwards and just tilt it up 90 degrees myself, right? And of course, maybe I want it to be the other direction. So if I go to top view, I could rotate here as well. I could say center here and rotate it. Come on, rotate. Or I could just make this easier on myself and say 90 degrees. There we go. All right, perfect. Now I can move. And let's say I want to snap this corner over to that corner. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It looks like this notch could have a relationship with that notch if I actually rotated this 180 degrees, but all right, so that's how I can start to put things together in space once I have them made, just like if I had a piece of paper or a piece of foam core and was building a model, okay? You're gonna have vertical and horizontal components here to sort of put in place and slide through. And really, you know, I think the key thing is if we go back to the rubric, you want to try to create these 3 distinct spaces, right? So, and how we define spaces doesn't have to necessarily be like there's a clear wall between this space and this space, right? It could be that here's a space and it interlocks with a space that actually goes 2 times taller, right? But there are ways to make informal thresholds, aren't there, right? Like for instance, we could change, for instance, when we walk downtown, one of us this, right? We can change what the materials on the ground plane. Outside, out in the outdoors, there are things like outdoor rooms, right? We can create tree canopies, which create outdoor rooms. We can use trees, plants, and other sort of softscape as dividers or as focal points, right? So it's the same thing here, right? You can create distinct spaces without necessarily creating hard divisions, I would argue, right? If you don't believe me, look up a really famous modernist architect named Mies van der Rohe. He made the Barcelona Pavilion. You can see that he creates rooms simply with shifting planes, right? In fact, these beautiful book folded marble slabs. Actually, they're really wonderful. Book matched. So you know, take a quarry slab, and you basically take what the sort of large equivalent, stone equivalent of a bandsaw, and slice it like a loaf of bread, and then you book match it. You just sort of do this, and then you have sort of symmetry. It's really kind of gorgeous. So if you look up the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe as an example of a house, very simple, very simple, minimalist house, right? But one that creates spaces that flow one to the next, right? But there are distinct spaces. Right? All right. So anyway, the rubric, that's what I was talking about. Spatial variety, right? So again, there should be a variety of sort of volumes on the inside and interlocking. Sometimes they interlock, right? Spatial interlock is interesting when one space flows into the other, right? When I could be overlooking down and across a space, right, on a mezzanine, or when you have a larger space bifurcate into 2 smaller spaces, etc. Formal interest, right? So when we talk about form or formal, right, we're talking about the shape, right? So the overall form or shape created. Do not think in terms of this is the front and this is the back, or this is the top or the bottom, right? I would argue good pieces of architecture don't necessarily always have a back and a front. Okay. Now, when we're working in an urban system, then that allows us to sometimes put the sort of back end in. But sometimes these things change, right? So suddenly, what we call the ass end of a building can be sort of like the thing people see, you know, when the neighbor gets torn down and nothing gets put in its place for a while. So there's nothing worse than having you know, a clear back to a building that then gets exposed and suddenly becomes, you know, an eyesore, right? So think in terms of the composition. You can turn it on any of its faces and it's still pretty interesting, any of its 6 sides, okay? In fact, that's such a foundation design thing to do. Someone will bring in a model and then I turn it upside down and go, doesn't it work better like this? And everybody goes, oh, really? Yeah, it does. All right. So anyway, sometimes every once in a while that actually works. And then following the instructions. So again, just follow the instructions carefully. Okay. Now, one last thing I'll show you guys, although what I want to see tomorrow, oh, we're actually done with time. Sorry, we're actually over. My bad. So really quickly, I want you to try your best. I want you to try to make 5 of these things. And tomorrow, the first thing we'll do is we'll share and we'll troubleshoot and we'll debug all the problems you guys have. And some of you will have some problems. It's just a given, okay? All right, so if everybody didn't run into difficulty, I would be highly surprised and pleasantly surprised. We can move forward pretty quickly. But tomorrow I'll talk about making axon drawings and some perspectives, okay? All right, and we'll debug. All right, so try your best, and I'll see 3 of you later this afternoon. I can't wait in the lobby. All right. See you then. Enjoy
All right.
your
See you.
555 course. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you
Thank you.
later.
Yep. Everything all right, Bijan? All right, he's gone. Contrell, you want to talk? All right.
Yeah.
So for
Um,
independent study, what I would do is just, every week, or, if you want to check in more than once a week during this, like at the end of one of these classes, feel free, but the onus is on you to sort of do it. Okay.
Right.
If you think you're going to run out of time and you need a little more time, just let me know and I can give you an incomplete. And then you have a little more time to complete, and then I can give you a grade just like anybody would. That's the one power I have as an instructor, is I can give incompletes and change the grade afterwards if I want. Okay. So how's it going? I forget which competition you went with. Was it the
it
small
like
library?
it was the Hong Kong vertical tower.
Okay, great. All right. You want to use some Grasshopper and some Revit with this, or what are your goals for it?
I do. I want to use Grasshopper with it,
Yeah.
but
What about
right now-
Midjourney? You want to use some Midjourney for some inspiration too?
I do. I want to
Have you
get
been
into it.
typing it in? Yeah. All right. So I was actually this morning, I was playing around with the new text to video service. For the freebies only give you the latest model only gives you 4 seconds of video each time, but it's kind of interesting still.
I got I use the one I pay $30 a month. So.
That's Midjourney. Yeah, Midjourney's great. Yeah, use it all you want. Then use it a bunch, because you're paying for unlimited use with $30 a month. So if you still have that subscription, use it. And in fact, if you want, one way to do this, make a Discord server and share it with me and put the Midjourney bot in there, and we can both riff off of some of your prompts to generate some ideas, or to think about what I find is interesting about Midjourney is that a lot of times it doesn't think like you do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so as a devil's advocate, it sort of it gives you options you probably wouldn't have thought of. So that could be helpful, perhaps.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, at the same time, and teach you how to just say different things.
Yeah, well, it hones in exactly what kind of language, what kind of words, the kind of description you want to use too, right? Okay. All right. So what I would recommend doing is thinking about hitting up Midjourney quite a bit and arrange things in a grid, but land on certain concepts that you really want to take forward. You can either through digital means or analog means with a paper, a pencil, a sketchbook, whatever you want to do. Then can draw some conceptual massings or the ideas of how you think something might be organized, right? Draw the system, and then you can always figure out how the system can go on a site and become tall or whatever. But that'd be my advice, right? These things are usually, the more modularly and systematically you can think about it, the easier it is. And you don't have to figure everything out because it's just a design competition, right? So as long as it doesn't, it's not too obvious that certain things don't quite work, you don't have to figure it all out, right? Which is really hard to do. That usually there's teams of people doing it over a longer period of time. So keep that in mind, right? Be particular about the scope and realistic about the scope you can cover. Okay. If you want to touch base tomorrow after, or if you want to wait till next week, either way, I'm always available a couple minutes after this class, and we can touch base and talk and look at things together. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, because basically the point I made, I did a whole bunch of research. I found a site that fit qualifications.